I'm Kyle Sylvester. I'm the open space manager for the city of Brighton. I'm here with Adam Rhodebeck. He's our city forester. We're both ISA certified arborists, and today we're going to talk about emerald ash borer and what that looks like coming into the city of Brighton. Right now, we don't have any confirmed cases of emerald ash borer in the city, but we anticipate it's going to come pretty soon. Showed up in Boulder in 2013, and it's been spreading through the Front Range almost every other year into other cities like Broomfield, Fort Collins, Westminster, other cities. So we anticipate it coming to Brighton pretty soon. So we want to educate the public as best we can of what emerald ash borer looks like, what does it look like when it's affecting an ash tree, and how to tell if your ash tree is in decline. And there's other bugs out there too that can affect your ash tree as well. So we're kind of go over everything as much as we can, treatment options, those kinds of things, and give you the best education possible so you can make the best decision possible for determining what to do with your ash tree. Ash trees were planted very heavily in the last 50, 60 years by many arborists throughout the nation. Emerald ash borer popped up in Michigan in 2002, and it spread like wildfire. It killed about 70 million ash trees since then, and that's a large number. And they planted ash trees by the millions back in the 50s and 60s because we had a large population of American elms. American elms were planted in the 20s and 30s by the millions because they were a really good shade tree. They grew fast, but they got Dutch elm disease, and that wiped them out by the millions. And so what did they replace them with? Ash trees. Well, now here we are again with a large percentage of our canopy as ash trees. We're thinking maybe 15 to 25% depending on your community. So 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 of the trees in the urban forest are ash trees, which is why this is a concern to us. And if emerald ash borer does come through, it can really wipe out a good chunk of your forest, your tree canopy. So that's why it's an issue. In Brighton, we're thinking maybe 15% ash, but that's still a good number. And there's even more ash in the private sector. When you're talking about homes, residential homes, there's probably at least 1 or 2 ash in every other house. So this is a big deal. It's something we're trying to get ahead of a little bit here. And I think the first key is identifying even if you have an ash.
And so there are 2 defining factors to help you identify your tree to see if it actually is an ash. The first one would be opposite branching. So that's where your branches are going to come out on either side of the stem. And you can see here that they're opposite of each other. So that's where your opposite branching comes into play. And the second one is going to be a compound leaf. So this is 1 leaf with 5 leaflets on it. So that's a compound leaf that helps you identify if it's an ash tree versus something like a maple tree. So as you can see here, this is a maple that has also opposite branching, just like the ash tree. However, it has a single leaf, whereas the ash tree has a compound leaf with multiple leaflets. And then most trees are going to be alternate branching, such as this elm tree. And that is where you have a branch, then a space, then another branch, and they alternate.
So we're looking at a couple ash trees that are in one of our parks over here at Bergman Park. One tree in the background is full. This one in the front is not so full as far as canopy goes. And this is not always an indicator of emerald ash borer, but this is what a lot of people are seeing around town. This could be a result of the early freezes that we have. This could be a result of it's been attacked by lilac ash borer, which is another insect that can attack trees. It could be a lot of different things, but if your tree's starting to look like this and it's not as full as the one is in the back, that's something to start looking at, and then you can start making decisions on whether or not you want to treat it or whether or not you want to remove it. Emerald ash borer, when it attacks, it'll fly onto the tree, lay its eggs. This usually happens around June. The eggs hatch essentially. The larvae goes inside the tunnel and bores inside the living part of the bark tissue, which is what we call the cambium, that's right inside the bark, and it eats that whole cambium layer, and that's the living force of the tree. It's really thin, but that's what the bee or the larvae is eating throughout the winter essentially. And as it's eating, it's growing bigger and bigger and bigger. It makes an S-type gallery, so it's very distinct. It looks kind of like an S over and over again. Serpentine is what they call it. And then as it develops in March, it turns like any other larvae into a beetle, and as it exits out into the world, it comes out of the bark and it makes a very distinct D-shaped pattern, just like the capital D. So it's flat on the top and a half moon on the bottom, and that's how you tell the difference between that and other borers that you might see on your ash tree.
So there are a couple of other borers that will be attacking your ash tree here in Brighton, and they're the ones that you will typically see on your ash. The first one is called a lilac ash borer, which is a clear-winged moth that actually looks a lot like a wasp, but that will leave a much larger exit hole on your tree, as well as it being circular rather than the capital D shape. And that insect doesn't necessarily kill your tree immediately like the emerald ash borer is known to do. However, it does weaken your tree and it can kill it eventually. Just it'll be a slow decline rather than as quick as an emerald ash borer would kill it. Your second borer that is very common throughout Brighton is going to be a bark beetle, which also leaves a circular exit hole, but it's much smaller than the lilac ash borer, and normally they're in rings around the branch. So you'll see just a ring of tiny little holes around some of the smaller branches on your tree. But those two are very common throughout Brighton, yet they are not known for killing the trees quite as readily as the emerald ash borer.
So this is an exit hole of lilac ash borer. This is an autumn purple ash, but this is what an exit hole looks like. It's about that size. There's a whole lot more down here. You'll see this tree is just kind of littered with holes, but those are all lilac ash borer. Again, they're big, they're somewhat symmetrical. Some of them are a little bit oval shaped, but they're not that distinct D shape. Emerald ash borer is a little bit smaller, or quite a bit smaller actually, and really you don't see the exit holes until the beetle itself has been in the tree for a few years and it's in huge quantities of numbers where there's so many of them they're coming out. That's when you notice the D holes. So it's hard to tell. If you start seeing exit holes like this in a pattern like that, that's more than likely lilac ash borer. When you do have emerald ash borer, the good thing about it is a couple things for treatment. One, if your tree is healthy and it's a good shade tree and it's providing you value as a homeowner and it looks like it has a full canopy, you do have some treatment options. And those are, you can use a systemic. A systemic is like a root feeder with some imidacloprid. Imidacloprid is the active ingredient that people use for uptake. The tree uptakes that through its roots systemically, and it can treat the tree that way. So when the tree or the insect bites into the tree, it kills it essentially. It usually only works on trees that are 12 inches or smaller. Once you get to a bigger size tree, this is right on that cusp. Once it gets bigger than this, you have to use another method, which is in an injection method. And injections is something you'd probably have to hire an arborist for a tree company to do. It is a little technical, but what that is they drill a little hole at the base of a tree. They put in a little plug and they put in it's like a bag with a tube, just like an IV. It's like a tree IV. And essentially the tree uptakes that chemical and it absorbs it in the rest of the canopy of the tree. And that is very effective and it works really well with emerald ash borer. So that is a preventative method you can do. Now that it's getting closer to Brighton, you certainly could do that now. What's nice about that treatment is it'll last about 2 years before you have to redo it again. So that's the good part about systemic treatments. But again, your tree has to be big enough for it to take that. If it's smaller, you can still use imidacloprid. There are some sprays that you can put on the bark as well that also prevent that. If your tree isn't doing so well, and if it is smaller, knowing you're gonna have to treat that tree for the rest of its life, you are gonna have to treat the tree no matter what once emerald ash borer gets here. You can't just hope you give it enough water and it'll live, because in most cases, emerald ash borer will attack your tree whether if it's healthy or diseased, whether if it's young or if it's old. So you are gonna have to do treatment. So it might be a consideration for homeowners to, hey, I got a small tree here, I'm gonna have to treat it throughout the rest of its life. Maybe that's not worth it to me. The other option would be to remove it now and then replace it with another tree, a different species. We have a really good list at our webpage at brightonco.gov of trees that we recommend that you can switch them out with that are still good shade trees that don't get emerald ash borer or cause so many problems. So those are kind of your options as a homeowner. Adam and myself, again, are both certified arborists. If you need help in identifying your ash tree or help making those decisions, we can help you make those decisions. Whether or not to remove it or whether or not to keep it, just give us a call. We'd be glad to come out on site and help you. You can certainly call anybody on our certified tree list as well. They're all certified arborists, all certified tree companies. That's found on our webpage. But again, the biggest point is to make sure your tree is going to be healthy enough and has value before it can even uptake these chemicals or if it's even worth saving. If you think it's 30% or more dead, it's probably not worth saving at that point, and you're going to have to make a decision as a homeowner to remove it and replant something else. So just to recap, emerald ash borer is not in the city of Brighton. We do anticipate it coming here in the next year or two. We do want homeowners to look at their trees, but make sure they understand the difference between lilac ash borer and emerald ash borer. And if you have any questions for us, you can certainly give us a call. But remember, it does attack all ash species. Anything that's a green ash or an autumn purple ash, any ash species it will attack, whether if it's healthy or not. It does not attack mountain ash. Mountain ash are the one species that it will not attack because it's an entirely different genus. It's not an actual ash species. But if it's a green ash, autumn purple, blue ash, black ash, it's going to be affected by emerald ash borer eventually. So we just want to make sure you know the resources are online. We have an emerald ash borer website. We have an emerald ash borer management plan that you can look at to see how the city's addressing that right now. And you can also give us a call. We can come out and help you identify certain features of your tree and whether or not you should remove it. And we're here to help as best we can.